Let's be honest here, you're probably thinking if Frost Decay is good or not still after all this time. It's good. Well, you came to the right place because here we don't get to tell you if a spec is good or not. It's good. But instead we will showcase the talents, gear, essences, rotation, and a lot more so you can pick up the spec really quick and decide for yourself if the spec is good or not. It's good. And if you enjoy our content, then here is more of us. Yep, this is our new channel, mostly focused on the human aspects of Marcelian Online, the humane, the natural, and hey, we already have a video out for you, but don't you worry, this is not going to take anything away from our WoW content channel, and once you're done with this video, you can go check it out. It's all about the behind the scenes, the human interactions, good vibes, and maybe even improving yourself, life experience and stuff like that. And if you enjoy it, check it out. It's pretty cool. This video is an update to our previous video, which we did at the beginning of 8.2, and we will cover two main builds here, the Breath of SINDRAGOSA build and the icecap build. There are of course variations, and for the sake of your time, we won't post every little details that you can change, but provide you with helpful links down below for such. So if you want to know if Frost is better than Unholy, stick around because we're gonna get this show on the road. On the first row, you want to take Cold Heart in raids and situations where you want to have single target burst damage on a priority target. Play this correctly, meaning pop chains during a major buff or several, and it will chunk your target for crazy damage. It won't help as much in AoE scenarios where you don't have a priority target, so replacing it with Inexorable Assault in dungeons usually can be a good alternative. On the second row, you want Runic Attenuation in raids and when you play the Breath of SINDRAGOSA build, which we will go to in a bit. Some of the talents you will pick will match together with the choice you make on the last row. Runic Attenuation is strong since it generates runic power from your auto attacks, and runic power feeds into Breath of SINDRAGOSA. From a mathematical standpoint, this talent would be the biggest DPS increase. The issue is that in AoE dungeon specifically, you will end up generating so much runic power that it would be a DPS loss to spend it instead of spending your runes, specifically with a future talent down the road. As such, Murderous Efficiency will be a better choice for dungeons here, especially if you don't play Breath of SINDRAGOSA. This talent swaps your gas to runes and makes your runic power fodder for the Runic Empowerment passive to generate more runes and not to actually deal damage. The third row is a utility row with the options up for your discretion. Asphyxiate is a general purpose single target stun that can work great on stunnable adds or dungeon trash mobs. Blinding Sleet is an AoE disorient with more use to be had in dungeons. This is good to interrupt casts in an AoE fashion, specifically those that cannot be interrupted normally, and if you have done any amount of mythics this expansion, you know there are a crap ton of casts to interrupt. Another note to be made here is that there are 1 or 2 disorients in your party realistically at one time, meaning it will not DR as much as stuns would. Since the advent of Havocs and Outlaws and Warriors, stuns will be aplenty. Fifth row is finally a row that can explain some choices you picked and choices you will pick in the future. The main and best single target option here is Frozen Pulse. When you fight raid bosses, since that's when you want to use this, you'll ideally have 3 runes on cooldown always, so this talent will have a close to 100% uptime as possible. In dungeons, you can and should swap to Frost Scythe. Frost Scythe is the AoE version of Obliterate and only costs 1 rune and does massive AoE damage. In AoE, you will find yourself, like I mentioned earlier, capping either runic power and runes, and you want to prioritize consuming the runes instead of the runic power, since Frost Scythe does way more damage than Frost Strike will ever do in AoE. Next up, the defensive slash I don't want to die please row. Essentially all options are valid and each have their niche. Permafrost is a passive absorb shield you generate if the fights will have trickles of constant damage coming out on you, which is a bit rare right now. Wraith Walk is the de facto mobility skill that will get you from point A to point B and will most likely be your ideal raid choice when transitioning between phases, chasing the bosses around, and so on. Death Pact is your oh shit option and has some amazing uses in dungeons, specifically against emissaries and very dangerous affixes, providing you with a large chunk of health that will absorb incoming healing for 15 seconds as well, so be mindful of that. The 6th row brings 2 viable options as well. The universal option, both good in raids and dungeons, and for both builds, is Gathering Storm. This talent scales really well, it's very reliable, and has an even bigger synergy with a specific Azurite trait, which we will go over in a bit. Frostworm's Fury is also a popular and fun option to play with. This works in the same way as Cold Heart, but for AoE. You want to pair this up with as many cooldowns and trinkets and buffs as you can for one of the biggest single GCD bursts in the game, at least for AoE. And the last row, but not least of course, we have the nails in the coffins, so to speak. Breath of Syndragosa, for better or worse, is the best performing option on the row in raids and sometimes in dungeons as well. In raids is pretty straightforward. You want to hit this on the boss 100% of the time, and all bosses have phases that will let you do this if you time it properly. It's also very good in AoE and dungeons in general, but requires a bit more planning and communication with your tank, since you don't want to pop this on a pack of 4 mobs and then when it's on cooldown your tank just pulls like 15 more. For those types of situations, mostly pug life scenarios, icecap is the better option. It's more consistent and reliable, easier to use, and let's be real here, it's a big change of pace for frost decays that have been playing non-stop Breath for more than a year now. You do need some specific Azurite traits to make this competitive with Breath, but more on that later. We rambled about the talents for quite a bit, but before we go into the next section, consider enabling those notifications because it does help the channel grow and motivates Marcelian for editing more of these videos in the future. In BFA, and hopefully only in BFA, simming is the only reliable way to understand if a gear piece is a good upgrade for you or not. Regardless of what anyone tells you, you have to sim if, and strong point on if, you want to perform at 100% capacity. With that being said, we understand some people don't like it or think it's troublesome, and I cannot argue with that. The general stat priority sees critical strike at the top, which shouldn't be a big surprise for Frost players because killing machine is fucking awesome. Next up you have mastery, haste with versatility and strength at the bottom. This will not be the case as you get more gear and progress through 8.3 in the future, and as an example, here is how my stats look for the Breath build and also for the icecap build. Not only are they different from the basic priority, but different from each other. This is just so you understand that in order to make something work to its full potential, you have to min-max a lot of stuff. Maybe we can say bye-bye to this in Shadowlands though, so fingers crossed. Until then, pick your rings and trinkets according to your stats. But if you want your best trinkets, then there are a few that really stand out. In raids, and even better if you're raiding most of the time, take Ajara's Font of Power and Ashvane's Razor Coral. Not only are they crit machines, but strength pools as well, and they are pushing Frost ahead of a lot of the specs in terms of DPS output in the raid. In dungeons, you can and should keep the Font of Power trinket ideally, but you can replace the Ashvane's Coral with the Gore-Crusted Butcher's Block from Waker's Manor or the Vial of Animated Blood from Underot. These trinkets currently perform the best out of the entire loot pool, and they will be worth your time if you aim to get them. But enough about that, let's get to the meat of the builds, which are the traits. For raiding and the Breath of Syndragosa build, you want to go with Icy Citadel and Loyal to the End stacked as much as possible. If you also have room to squeeze in Frozen Tempest, it will do very well for you. Frozen Tempest can also be stacked, but not to a higher priority than the other two, and if you don't have all the options listed, one Echoing Hollow is also a good replacement option. Other than this, the other traits are pretty shitty for single target and you're better off with just generic crit traits instead. For dungeons and specifically for the icecap build, you want Frostwhelp Indignation 3 times. This is essentially what buffs your pillar to extreme numbers, but be careful not to pull extra packs when activating the ability. Or maybe that just happens to me. Icy Citadel and Frozen Tempest are good options in your other slots, and stacking them will also work, and similar to the raid build, Echoing Howl once is better than most other traits. You can run different combinations of these traits depending on your sims, and Breath of Syndragosa is a great build for Mythic Plus as well, so don't feel too cornered into something specific. Traits are not the only thing that pushes you on the top of the meters. Essences will also come into play, and you have some options here, ideally with rank 3s, since most essences are incredibly weak at rank 2 in comparison. When raiding and single target in general, take Condensed Life Force on your major, Memory of Lucid Dreams and Conflict and Stripes for your minors. Condensed Life Force is an easy press and forget cooldown where there isn't much to manage. It's specifically good if you can get 2 casts out of it, meaning the fight would last around 4 to 5 minutes. Memory as a minor helps with rune regeneration, which is crucial in single target, while Conflict is a big versatility boost that helps with pretty much everything. In dungeons, you essentially replace the major with Essence of the Focusing Iris, while the minors will remain ideally the same, Memory of Lucid Dreams and Conflict and Strife for the same arguments. These two are the easy builds and the fastest you can get out, but not the only viable ones. One of the strongest majors in the game for Frost Decays is Blood of the Enemy, that works great both in raids and in mythics and performs even better than the other two, although you do need to farm battlegrounds, and if it isn't at rank 3, you won't do much with it. This could be even stronger in 8.3 when you get the corrupted gear with crit bonuses, so keep it in mind. Starting with the Breath of Syndragosa build, to open on a boss you essentially want to get to 60 runic power, and you achieve that by obliterating 3 times. During this time you will get at least 1 rhyme proc, so use Howling Blast only then, but also every time you get the proc. After that, pop Empowered Rune Weapon, pop Pillar of Frost, and then pop, so fun to say pop, Syndragosa. After Syndragosa, your first rune should be used for Remorseless Winter, and then you proceed to your breath rotation priority, since it will change based on your procs. During breath, and I know I don't have breath here, but that's not the point, you want to follow this priority. Obliterate is the most important skill when you have less than 30 runic power. Remorseless Winter is next if you have the Gathering Storm talent. Howling Blast next if you have Rhyme procs. Obliterate if you have 5 or more runes, or if you have less than 45 runic power. Remorseless Winter is down here in the priority if you don't have Gathering Storm talented. And lastly, cast Obliterates only below 73 runic power so as to not cap on runic power. The idea here is to maximize the runes to runic power conversion and prolonging breath as much as possible. This can change based on your gear and procs, which all get better with higher eye level. If you run breath in AoE, you play it the same way, but replace Obliterates with Frost Sights when you are above 50 or so runic power, which should be easier since you will have more Frost Fevers to generate runic power. When you are outside of your cooldowns, the priority is as follows. Howling Blast is the most important spell when it can consume a rhyme proc. Use Obliterates if you have more than 2 runes available. Use Frost Strikes to take you below 73 runic power. Use Obliterates this far down if you have 4 or more runes, or Breath of Syndragosa has less than 10 seconds before it becomes available. Fill in with Obliterates normally otherwise, and Frost Strikes when there's nothing else to do. For the icecap opener, there isn't much to talk about here except pop Pillar and follow this priority. Remorseless Winter, especially with the Gathering Storm talent, is first on the list. Obliterates to consume Killing Machine procs and if you are below 73 runic power. Howling Blast to consume Rhyme or to refresh Frost Fever. Frost Strike to prevent runic power capping, and fill in with Obliterates and Frost Strikes otherwise. In AoE, as far as the priority goes, Howling Blast when you have Rhyme goes way up, followed by Frost Strike at 90 or more runic power. Frost Sight if you have a Killing Machine proc, Remorseless Winter on cooldown, Frost Sight as a filler, and Frost Strike if you have no more runes available. In AoE, it's more important to get out Frost Sights than to prevent runic power capping sometimes, especially if you have to choose between capping runic power and having all runes available. When it comes to your consumables, most of the time they will be crit related, since crit is usually the best stat. You can of course sim your character and see if any are worth replacing, and if they are, then do it. As for the rings and gems, your most used options will be a Cord of Critical Strike, a Leviathan's Eye of Strength, and the Deadly Lava Lazuli in the rest of your sockets. The weapons will be standard Frost Decay, Razor Ice on the main hand so Frost Sight can trigger the effect, and Fallen Crusader on the offhand. Moving to the alchemical romance part of the consumables, the strength flask is pretty obvious, but you can go with the potion of Unbridled Fury in single target unless you sim differently, and keep things simple with superior battle potion of strength if you go for AoE pre-potting. Lastly, the food will mostly consist of feasts, since the raw strength is better, but if that's not available, then having some McDowell's will be your next best choice. Speaking of other choices you have, check the Acaris Discord channel for DKs, and of course the Wowhead and Icy Veins guys that go into more details and advanced topics than we can cover in our basic guide for Frost Decays. And of course a special shout out to 3 wonderful Frost Decays that have helped us with a lot of information, feedback, corrections, and explanations as to how this spec works in the current meta. Banter, Degrain, and Biceps Pump, that's so fun to say, have helped us a lot, and you guys should check them out. Some of them have streams, some of them stream occasionally, but they're very active in the Acaris Discord channel and help a lot of DKs learn and understand and improve their DPS. So you guys are the real MVPs. But we do have some very, very special MVPs for our channel, and those are our Patreons. Guys, we love you so much. Thank you so much for all of your support for all of these months, and in the upcoming months, hopefully, we can only hope. We really are thankful for this, because this helps us continue our work and always constantly improve, because you give us the motivation, because you like our stuff. And if you're interested in supporting the channel a little bit more than normal, you can check the details down below. We have a Patreon link, and we even have some merch out that you might like, merch like this shirt. See, this is all done by Marcelian. It's pretty sexy. You have like Ashbringer and all of cool little stuff, and there's a lot more where that came from, so check it out. Thank you for watching the video. Hope you found it helpful, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.